What's up, guys? We are back with our new series. So I hope you guys really enjoyed the program design series. I hope that was insightful, let you kind of build out some of your own programs or helped you kind of push forward some of the programs that you're writing for your clients. The next series that we are going to offer or that we are going to be recording for you guys is going to be our popular fad diet pro and con. The first one that we're going to be looking at today is flexible dieting and IIFYM. For the purpose of this presentation, we're mostly going to be talking about IIFYM because, and we'll talk about this, flexible dieting is more of a mindset to eating, where IIFYM is a specific diet. So what I want to do with this series, just a little background, is I want to give a genuine pro and con of each of these diets. I don't want to bash any diets or any nutritional approaches just for my own gain. I want to really look at what are the pros to each of these approaches and what are the cons to each of these approaches. And we're going to start with everyone's favorite, if it fits your macros. So some definitions and some origin stories here. IIFYM. A lot of people say it. I mean, there's apparel brands. How many people do you think they're on Instagram with IIFYM before their name? IIFYM Paul, IIFYM Samantha. All these different names that have IIFYM. But where did it actually come from? So where did this originate? So it's actually circa the bodybuilding.com forums. It was started by a fellow named Eric Cohenrick and Alan Aragon. So you can find both of them on Instagram. Eric is at Powered by Ice Cream, and our family food dude, I don't know. He changes his name a lot. Sorry, Eric, if you watch this. There's no way Eric watches this. And then Alan Aragon, you can find him by just searching Alan Aragon. Two good people to follow in the industry. But back on the bodybuilding.com forums, there was always the questions that came up of, hey, can I have fruit in my contest prep diet? Can I fit cheese onto my omelet in the morning? And instead of the long-winded response of, well, as long as that food has a protein and carb and fat allotment that matches up with your goals for the day, then it is fine to eat it. They just started saying, if it fits your macros. And it became somewhat of like a meme before there was meme culture. Everyone would just say IIFYM. Can I fit fruit into my prep diet? IIFYM. Can I fit cheese onto my omelet in the morning? IIFYM. So that's where it started. And it was really started to break this stigma of rigid dieting. So in that period of time, it was very, very popular for people who were trying to pursue fitness goals, specifically weight loss and muscle gain, to follow somewhat of a bodybuilder clean eating style approach where they would eat some sort of meal plan that was very strict, and it was something like chicken, brown rice, and broccoli 7 times a day. You packed up your Tupperwares, you took them with you for the day, and that was what you ate for the day. And then IIFYM came out of that to say, listen, yes, you can do the meal planning style thing, but if there are other foods that you want to fit in that fit with your macros, then you can choose those instead. Now, flexible dieting is a little bit different than if it fits your macros. People use the two terms interchangeably, but they're not interchangeable terms. Flexible dieting was more of a mindset approach to dieting. It was something that said, 1, you need to know what your macros are. 2, you need to make mindful choices. And 3, you need to be flexible in your approach to meeting your macros. So it was more of saying, hey, have the education going in to know what your body needs to lose or gain weight, and then kind of fill in the diet from there and be flexible with your choices. So it wasn't so much of just eat whatever, and as long as it fits your macro, it's good. It's still make the mindful choices, but make sure that they meet up with your macros. So where did flexible dieting come from? I'm not 100% sure. I did some digging. I heard some people say it started on the bodybuilding.com forums. I heard some people say it started with Lyle McDonald. Lyle has a great book, The Guide to Flexible Dieting, that I recommend that everyone read, where he does a better job of explaining flexible dieting than I ever could in this video. So just go grab that instead, because we're going to stick with IIFYM today. So full disclosure, the Macro Experiment folks, I actually like them a lot. I follow them on Instagram. They make some stuff that actually looks good. They make some stuff that looks terrible, but they do make some stuff that kind of looks pretty tasty. But I'm using them as an example because they kind of personify the bastardization of IIFYM of, hey, let's take whey protein and coconut flour and this and that, and let's make a carrot cake or a Pop-Tart or this kind of stuff so we can have those foods that we're not supposed to have, but actually have them because we made them a certain way. So where did IIFYM actually start? So it started as a way of saying, hey, listen, you can vary your food choices. This is intended to decrease the rigidity of the diet, give you higher degrees of freedom during dieting, to allow you to do the things that you enjoy that make you a human while dieting, eating out, going out for dates or for social gatherings, allowing you to mix up protein sources. You can swap pork tenderloin for chicken if the macros match up, choosing different carb, different fat choices, grabbing a snack so you don't have to follow that rigid meal plan structure of like eat at 7 a.m. and then eat at 10 a.m. and so on and so forth. And then you can also grab on-the-go foods. You're stuck in traffic on your way to work. You're not going to have time to pick up or make your usual healthy breakfast. Whatever it is, you stop off at McDonald's, you grab a couple of their egg white sandwiches that fit your macros, and you go on with your day. That was what IIFYM was supposed to be, and that's where it started. But where it got to was, hey, you can eat whatever the hell you want to as long as it fits your macros. You've got 300 grams of carbs in a day. That's fine. Eat 4 packs of Pop-Tarts and you'll still have 20 left over. So you can have a couple Oreos as well. And that was not the intention when it first started. It was intended to break up rigidity, and it just became an absolute free-for-all. And I think that we have social media, specifically Instagram, to thank for that. So all of a sudden it's spun out into these ridiculous recipes, these macro hacks. Walden fucking Farms. Walden Farms. Perfect look at how crazy IIFYM got. So what's my big issue with this? Why do I have an issue with these macro hacks? Is if you ever had one of these foods before that's like protein powder and xanthan gum and this and that and the other, does it taste good? You bet your ass it does. However, does it make you feel good? No. You're hungry 5 minutes later, your stomach is all jacked up, your beehole is absolutely destroyed from it, and you would have been far better off from a micronutrient and from a feel perspective, just opting for something that was maybe less palatable, but had a little bit more nutrition in it. So that's where we've gotten to with this kind of IIFYM mentality. It was, hey, you could fit some more foods in if you really wanted to, as long as they're still, the basics, lean protein, fruits, vegetables, that kind of stuff. And then it got all the way over to, you can fit in whatever the hell you want as long as it matches up with your protein, carbs, and fat for the day. And I like this. I've always said this about the fitness industry, is that it operates on a pendulum. And IIFYM came as one of these maximas on the pendulum. So I gave some kind of some examples of the fitness culture pendulum here, where we basically just swing back and forth. And the truth is at that, or the truth of the most value, the true nuggets of information are at that equilibrium point in the middle. So some examples here, you had people swinging to one side and said, listen, every set has to be taken to failure or you're not growing any muscle. And then it swung back to the other side and said, no, you should never ever train to failure. Keep your RPEs low and do a crazy amount of volume. The truth was in the middle. It was that failure can be a valuable tool, but it's not something to be used too much. So you want to have most of your work at relatively challenging but not failure RPEs, and then throw in failure here and there as just another tool in the program. Next example, muscle damage. You got to absolutely destroy the muscle. You shouldn't be able to walk after leg day or you're not growing. The other side was like, nope, that Damas study said you shouldn't be sore at all or you're not going to be growing at all. What's the truth? It's right there in the middle. In the earlier weeks of your training, where your training as a whole just isn't as challenging, you probably shouldn't be getting that sore. And then in the later weeks, as you kind of increase that intensity of training, a little bit of soreness is a good sign. Some of the other examples I gave there, some talk about supplements there, and then mind-muscle connection versus just slanging and banging heavy weights. But the last one is the one that's relevant to this presentation, and that's clean eating and IIFYM. So we started on one maxima, and we said, all right, clean eating, got to have chicken, rice, and broccoli for every meal. And we swung, and IIFYM became this clean eating counterculture that said, hey, while you're eating your chicken and broccoli, I'm eating donuts, and I'm still losing body fat. And again, we want to be right in the middle. So what does the middle say there? It says that, well, the majority of your food should be those kind of bro foods. It should be the lean proteins, the fruits, the veggies, and the whole grains. And then once you've met your protein, your fiber, your micronutrient needs for the day, then you can kind of fit in some smaller snacks that you enjoy. But again, where was the truth? It was in the middle. But the fitness industry likes to swing back and forth and say, this is the truth out here. No, 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 this is the truth out here. But the truth remains in the middle there. All right, so let's look at some pros on IIFYM. First one I want to look at is the inclusive versus exclusive mentality. Basic psychology tells us that an exclusive mentality leads us to relapse quicker. So what does that mean? It means that I tell you, okay, we're starting a diet today. You can't have chocolate. Do you like chocolate? It's all right. I can eat it, I guess. I don't really like it that much. But as soon as I tell you, all right, well, on this diet, you can't have any chocolate, you're like, ooh, I'm kind of fiending for some chocolate right now. That basic psychology tells you that we want what we can't have. So as soon as you tell someone they can't have something, they immediately want it. So that would be an example of that exclusive mentality of you can't have this. Now, the research that I'm quoting here is from Lauren Conlon. I believe this came out of Bill Campbell's lab at USF. And the title of the research, if you want to look it up, it's also going to be in the references at the end that I will give you guys, is Inclusive versus Exclusive Dieting and the Effects on Body Composition in Resistance-Trained Individuals. So they took 27 men and women, 27 total, 10-week dieting phase. So half of them did a rigid plan and half of them did a flexible plan. They were both on a 25% estimated caloric deficit. The rigid, they were given macros and they were given calories to follow, but they got a meal plan to meet those macros and those calories. So they were only allowed to eat things like eggs, egg whites, protein shakes. Their carbs were oats, berries, pretty much lean meats, some starches, veggies, and then a little bit of oils if they needed to fill in their fats. Whereas the flexible groups, they said, hey, listen, we're going to teach you how to track, we're going to teach you how to weigh all your food and all of that, and then we're going to give you these macros and you're just going to run with it. The results of the study, no significant difference in weight loss between groups or body fat loss or decreased body fat percentage. You would kind of expect that because they were both on a 25% deficit. The next part's kind of weird. I suspect that it had something to do with the groups maybe training differently. Not 100% sure, but the flexible dieting group gained a significant amount of lean body mass where the rigid group did not. Not 100% sure how to explain that one. I suspect it's training or something lifestyle related. No other changes in the 10-week period. Now, what I would like to see as a follow-up to this would be something like a 4-week post-diet period where you pretty much just take the chains off and say, you know what, just go do whatever you want at this point, and then we'll see you in 4 weeks, and we'll see who's actually eating a higher calorie intake or who's gained a lot of that weight back. My suspicion is that the rigid group would gain more back than the flexible group, but I would have to see that in the research before I made any conclusions. Some more pros of IIFYM. It works well if you are a pro. So what do I mean by a pro? If you come from a fitness or a bodybuilding lifestyle and you've done the clean eating thing, you've been tracking your food for a while, you've been emphasizing the right foods, you've weighed your stuff before, it's going to be very, very easy for you because you're basically just going to have to move your portions around to meet up with your macros. But there are folks out there who have never, ever done this before. It's very easy to just get stuck in our own sphere of people who are tracking macros and eating healthful foods all the time and say, oh, that's everyone. But no, Jim over there had a Slim Jim and a Frappuccino for breakfast, and that's normal breakfast for him. So how are you going to just give him, all right, here's your protein, carbs, and fat, hit those numbers? He's going to be completely lost. So there needs to be some sort of education period in here, or people are going to be doomed to fail. Now, it's also adjustable to your food preferences. So let's say you like things like rice cakes instead of brown rice. You like white potato instead of sweet potato. You like turkey breast instead of chicken breast. It's adjustable to those food preferences. So you're not locked into any food choices, which is it's a good thing. No worries there. It can also, in some scenarios, help limit micronutrient deficiencies. So if you're coming from like an old school clean eating bodybuilding approach where chicken, rice, and broccoli were your only foods that you ate and you ate it 6 times a day, throwing in some different foods will expose you to some different micronutrient qualities or quantities in those foods and maybe kind of fill in some of the gaps that you developed over the years. Also allows for eating out. So you can be a normal human being. You can go on date night. You can have Thanksgiving dinner with the family as long as you make it fit your numbers. So you can, but with this, there's a caveat because you do still have to make smart decisions. You can't just go out and eat whatever you want because you still have to make the wise decision. So you still have to choose the lean meats, the fruits, veggies, the stuff that I'm saying over and over again. So last one on this slide is going to be that it is freeing for some. So some people, you remove them from the meal plan. They're like, oh, I can finally breathe. I don't have to, I can stop eating those same freaking foods every single day. Whereas others become obsessed. It becomes, all right, how can I fit in as many of those foods that I wasn't allowed to have before? And we're going to revisit that on the cons slide. Couple more pros here. So another piece of literature that I found on eating disorder research, because you often hear people say, oh, if it fits your macros or flexible dieting, you don't develop eating disorders. So that's what this study wanted to look at. They took a sample of 188 non-obese women, 29% underweight, 52% normal, 19% overweight. So a good random sampling here. And the goal was to look at rigid and flexible dieting strategies and see if they found any incidence or any differences in the incidence of disordered eating or eating disorder behaviors, dysmorphia, anything like that. What they found might not surprise you. It's that the rigid dieters reported higher incidence of eating disorders, mood disturbances, dysmorphia, and high association with BMI, whereas the flexible dieters had a lower incidence of that. The issue with a study like this is all we've done is take a random sample of women and say, all right, who follows a rigid diet, who follows a flexible diet? Now we're going to look at eating disorder behaviors. And you don't know which kind of direction to infer causation. Is it because they had disordered eating behaviors that they chose a rigid diet, or did the rigid diet give them those disordered eating habits? So it's impossible to draw a line of causation in one direction or the other. But what we do know from this study is that there's a higher incidence of disordered eating in those who follow a rigid diet. What caused it? We're not 100% sure. The authors concluded that the findings suggest that rigid dieting has a higher association with eating disorder symptoms. But again, don't know which direction to draw the arrow there. And my counterpoint to the authors of this study would be that anecdote, and this is a question to you as well. Have you ever met someone who's a macro tracker and the level of macro tracking detail that they go into seems somewhat disordered? They've got to hit their protein, their carb, and their fat to the exact, or they're sitting on MyFitnessPal for 90 minutes before a meal trying to figure out exactly what they can fit. I would make the argument that that is also disordered behavior. But again, I'll leave you to answer what you think about that question. All right, getting into the cons. So the cons, and we've kind of discussed some of these already as counterpoints to the pros, but the cons, the main con is that without some sort of education, this is an absolute nightmare of a dieting approach. And why is it a nightmare? Because if you've never tracked your food before, if you've never eaten quote unquote healthy before, if you haven't lived like this nutritious or this fitness lifestyle, and you're coming into this blind, it's going to be a rough go if you don't have anyone to educate you. The literature suggests anywhere from 18 to 54% underreporting in overweight individuals. That means that if someone came to you and said, hey, I eat 2,000 calories a day, they could be underreporting by over 1,000 calories. They could be eating 3,000 calories a day instead of 2,000 because they just genuinely have no idea of what portion size is. They got a cereal bowl that's this big, and like, I had one bowl of cereal, but it was 14 servings. They're going to drastically underreport it, and they've never done this before. So there needs to be an education and a learning process. What should this education and learning process look like? Well, it's really up to you. If you're a coach, you kind of have to develop your own system. So a good system might be something like you bring someone in, first day, they've never tracked, they've never eaten healthy before, and you just say, listen, just download MyFitnessPal on your phone, track what you normally eat for a week, weigh some of this stuff out, and we can get an idea of what you're actually eating. They come to you after a week, they say, all right, here's my food logs. And then maybe you sit down with them with some sort of educational sit down where you talk about, all right, here's the foods that we're going to emphasize. Here are your nutritious foods. Here are your not so nutritious foods. We want 80% of what you're eating to be these foods over here, the health promoting foods, and then maybe limit your portion sizes of the less healthful foods over here. You say, all right, you got a week, go do it again. Come back to you in a week. They've started to learn how to incorporate some of those more healthful foods into their diet, and then you can sit down with them and say, all right, let's sit down and let's give you some macros here, and let's build out a meal plan that works for you, and then that allows you to have most of the good stuff and then fit in some of that other stuff that you enjoy. But what's a negative to that is that that's a 3-4 week process. Most people come to you and they say, hey, I want results right away. I don't have 4 weeks to basically learn how to eat. So it's a short-term trade-off for long-term success, but getting people to buy into that can be difficult. Another con here is that IIFYM promotes or can lead to these childlike eating behaviors. People are having Skittles and a protein shake for breakfast because it fits my macros, bro. And that kind of stuff is really glorified on social media. People are, and we've talked about this, like lifting their shirt up to show their abs while they're eating donuts. And what that tells people who don't really understand kind of the calories in, calories out, energy balance, the physiology kind of thing is like, man, these people are eating donuts and look what they look like. I'm eating donuts, look what I look like. I must just be a failure. I must just not have the genetics to look like that. Because you're sending an incorrect message. You're showing the 5% of the treats that that you can enjoy and fit in, and you're leaving out the 95% of the healthful foods that you're actually eating the majority of the time. But no one wants to see a picture of chicken and asparagus. They want to see ab veins and a donut, or bicep veins and curling a McDonald's burger to your mouth, whatever it is. IIFYM also opens the door to something that I call food obsession. I've heard a couple people actually call this food obsession. And food obsession is this process by which you become just absolutely engulfed and entrenched in fitting in as much of the food that you enjoy as you possibly can. Doing everything you possibly can to make your food as palatable as possible, because if you don't get very much of it, God damn it, it better be as tasty as possible. You want to see how food obsessed you are? Track how long it takes you to make your breakfast when you are massing in a calorie surplus, and track how long it takes you to make your breakfast when you are cutting. You can really use any meal. It doesn't have to be breakfast. It can be something like dinner. When you're massing, you're making a protein shake with some fruit and some vegetables, and you're just blending it up and taking it on the go, and you're out the door in 2 minutes. Whereas when you're cutting, you're making this Gordon Ramsay approved sophisticated egg dish that takes you 45 minutes to make, and it's this big, but it's so delicious and you love every second of eating it. It's a good sign of food obsession. So what I encourage all of my clients to do at the end of a contest prep or the end of a diet is to log in the morning, put the normal foods that your normal diet foods into MyFitnessPal, close that app down, and don't open it back up. Because if you open it back up, you're going to start messing around. That food obsession is going to take over. You're going to start subbing this out, putting this in. Just leave it alone. Remember, the more palatable your food is, the tastier you make your food, the more likely you are to overeat. So it's a good tip at the end of the diet to kind of do away from this IIFYM approach and shift more over to the clean eating side of things, where you're eating less palatable foods. Just a little pro tip for you guys there. The last point on cons is going to be, you hear people say this. You don't hear the educated people say this, but you do hear some people say this, and they say that protein, carbs, and fat are all that matters. As long as you hit those numbers, you will lose weight. And there's some truth to that, but it's kind of a little bit disingenuous in what it's suggesting. Because what really happens here is that food quality goes out the window. People are no longer worried about making healthful choices. They're no longer eating fruits and vegetables. They're just eating just to the protein, carb, and fat, and as long as they get there, they're happy, and they don't know why they're hungry, and their performance is absolute shit, and they've got all these vitamin deficiencies. Well, it's because you told them that the only thing that mattered was 3 numbers, when there's a plethora of other things that are going to matter for total holistic health of your entire body. So don't teach to just the 3 numbers are the only thing that matters. You want to teach all of nutrition, and then once they've got a grasp of what foods they should really be emphasizing, then you can kind of distill it down and make it a little bit more simplistic. But don't start with the simplistic approach. All right, told you I was going to give it a grade. What is the grade for IIFYM? Drum roll, please. It's on the screen. We don't need a drum roll. I'm giving it a C+. C+, that's not a very good grade. So let me clarify. I'm giving it a C+ in its current state. If I wanted to give it a grade in the way that Alan and the way that Eric intended IIFYM to help people, I'd probably give it a B+ or an A-. In its original form, it was great. It still emphasized food quality, but it told people that they could include variety in their diet. And then it just spun off into absolute nonsense to where it is today. It's a C+. So C plus, you get a C plus back. You're like, ooh, I didn't do too well, but like, oh, it gets by. So that's kind of how I feel about IIFYM. Is it the best approach? Not really. Do people get by on it? Yeah, they do all the time. So the classic C's get degrees. A little highlight of some pros and cons here. So it does bring flexibility back to the diet. It's a great tool when you know what you're doing. The research suggests that it may reduce disordered eating behavior, maybe, and then allows for variety in food intake. So it brings that variety back. The cons are that it's very easy to screw up. It's very, very easy for people to screw this up, especially if you're not educated. If you're not educated, I would say you are doomed to fail. So hire a coach that's actually going to educate you on this stuff before just throwing numbers at you. So it doesn't really work in the social media age. People glorify it too much. They want to talk about their Kit Kat that they have every day. And then it can also turn into its own eating disorder where you're just so focused on these numbers and everything in your life revolves around these numbers that it's just as bad as having a full-fledged diagnosed eating disorder. Last point, it allows coaches to be lazy. So there are a million different macro calculators out there that you can just download, punch in your height, your weight, this and that and the other, and it'll spit out some macro numbers. You don't need a coach to do that. You need a coach to actually coach you through this, to teach you kind of how to fit those macros, what to do with them, how to optimize performance, and then once you know that, distill it down to, all right, I know the foods to eat. I know it's going to benefit my body the most. So now I can just focus on these three numbers with my certain foods. Like I said, I did include my references at the end here. So if you want, I didn't do a works cited, sorry, no APA formatting, because I don't give a shit. But if you want those references, you can always DM us on Instagram at Gifted Performance, and I would be glad to send you some reading material. Some notes before I leave you. We are looking to make this somewhere around a 5 or a 6-part series. If you've got a diet that you would like me to look at, please drop it in the comments below, and I will be glad to kind of dig into the pros and cons, as long as it's a popular diet. If it's like the alpaca meat diet that I've never heard of before, I'm not going to do it. Make sure it's a popular diet that people will actually get some information from. Like I said in the beginning, the goal of this series is to take a genuine, unbiased pros and cons approach to dissecting each of these diets. And that's what I intend to do, looking at some of the research, but not being too research heavy on it, because you guys don't want a research review. You can go subscribe to Mass or Weightology for something like that. As always, the shameless plugs. Go sign up at giftedperformance.com, $30 a month. 15 training programs, macronutrient calculation, as well as a place to log your macros, log your weights, log your PRs, and you can even build yourself out a meal plan based off of the macros that you get calculated using our list of many, many healthful foods. So you will find something on there that you enjoy. It is flexible dieting approved. If you want something a little bit more personalized, apply to work with one of our one-on-one coaches. We've got coaches in the field of powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit. We got posing coaches. We've got physical therapists to help you work through some of those little injuries. We also work with a ton of just general fitness clients. Just want to lose some weight, let us know, and we would be glad to help you. As always, you know the drill. Stay gifted, and I'm going to see you on the next one. See ya.